This is Infinity, and in today's hour-long episode, I'll tell you about the most unexplained and mysterious places on our planet. I'll show you places which defy the laws of physics, the Hell Highway and the Road of Death. You'll learn about the mysteries of the Bermuda Triangle and the Chernobyl exclusion zone. I'll also show you creepy places discovered on Google Maps. Sit back and relax. There'll be a lot to see. Upside Down Waterfall. The most populated island of the Hawaiian archipelago, Oahu, is known for its amazing nature. It's here that the Waipuia Falls, also known as the Upside Down Waterfall, is located. Contrary to the laws of gravity, it flows not from top to bottom, but from bottom to top. The reason is that the water falls from the top of the mountain downwards, but then the wind, which is common in those places, picks up the water flow and raises it up to the source of the waterfall. The stronger the wind, the brighter the impression of the abnormality of the waterfall. Jatinga Valley. Imagine you're strolling through a valley at night. Nothing bad's going to happen when suddenly dozens of birds begin to fall on you from the sky. No, they don't freak out and decide to attack you. They are precisely falling on you on the ground in a weakened and fainting state. Sounds crazy, I know, but such a place is not fiction. The Jatinga Valley, located in the Indian state of Assam, has long frightened scientists with its strangeness and puzzled people all over the world. The Jatinga Valley has long been called the Valley of Falling Birds. Once a year, flocks of birds arrive here in an almost unconscious state, and many of them falling from the sky. During this time, the bird circles so low to the ground that some locals even shoot them down with sticks and then cook the easy prey over fire. The birds that have fallen to the ground do not resist in any way. A person can take them unhindered and the birds will not get out of their hands. All this sounds very strange and creepy, but the scariest thing is that the reason for such behavior of the birds is unknown. Scientists only have speculations. According to them, there's a geomagnetic anomaly in the area. The version is not bad, but why the anomaly only appears sometimes and why it affects only the birds? Ornithologists shrug their shoulders, and locals are sure that the gods reward them for a righteous life by sending easy prey. Newgrange. Newgrange is an unusual megalithic cult structure located in Ireland, about 40 kilometers north of Dublin. It's one of the oldest structures, not only in Ireland but in the world as a whole. Scientists believe that it's older than the Egyptian pyramids by 700 years. In fact, Newgrange is a gallery grave. Nevertheless, researchers still do not know for whom exactly this long corridor with a transverse room was built. At the same time, not all scholars agree that Newgrange is exactly a tomb. Some believe it's an observatory, because during the winter solstice, the morning sunlight penetrates through the hole above the entrance and illuminates the room from the inside. But that's not all that's interesting. This place is mysterious because it looks as if it was built not 5,000 years ago, but much later. It's still unknown how ancient people were able to build such a perfect structure, which has not only been able to withstand preserving its original appearance, but also to remain completely waterproof for 5,000 years. Easter Island. Easter Island is interesting for several reasons. First, it's one of the most remote regions in the world. The nearest inhabited area is about 2,000 kilometers close, and tourists have to swim or fly 3,500 kilometers to Chile, to which the island belongs. But of course, the main feature of this island is not remoteness, but the strange Moai statues. Huge statues from 3 to 10 or even 20 meters high, weighing more than 10 tons, are still puzzling scientists. In the case of Moai, almost everything's unclear. It's not clear how exactly these statues were made, how exactly they were placed on the island, and most importantly, why they were made at all. But Easter Island is interesting not only for these statues, but also for strange wooden tablets called rongorongo, on which the writings of the ancient local Aborigines are written. As with these statues, the purpose of rongorongo is unknown. In general, Easter Island is a mystery. The mystery of this place is still unsolved, which makes the whole island look like a branch of something alien on Earth. Mount Kailash. There are many amazing mountains in Asia. Everyone's heard about the famous Mount Everest, but do you know about Mount Kailash? Although it's not the highest mountain in Asia and in the world, but it's definitely the most mysterious one. It's located in Tibet and is the highest in the region, Its height is about 6.5 to 6.6 kilometers. Mount Everest is higher by as much as 2 kilometers, but it's been conquered more than 1,000 times. However, no one has managed to climb to the summit of Mount Kailash. Those who have tried say that climbing this mountain is incredibly difficult and that it's hard to explain. But what's the reason? Scientists can't give an exact answer, but the locals believe that the reason is that Mount Kailash is the center of the universe and that the great god Shiva himself dwells on its summit. They believe that it's impossible to climb to the top because of Shiva's power, which resonates in the mountain. But that's not all. There's another mystery connected with this mountain. If you look at Mount Kailash, you'll see that the mountain is represented by a pyramidal shape. As researchers say, the facets are oriented almost perfectly to the cardinal directions. For this reason, many people believe that Kailash isn't a mountain, but a man-made structure, left by an unknown civilization or even aliens. Jihlava Catacombs. Jihlava is a city in the southeast of the Czech Republic. One of the main attractions is the catacombs, which length reaches 25 to 30 kilometers. The catacombs run through the whole city. Once they were mines for mining silver, and then they were used for household needs. These catacombs have several secrets. Archaeologists who worked in the catacombs said that in some places the sound of organs were heard, and in one of the passages they found a glowing ladder that emitted reddish light. Similar stories were told by tourists visiting the catacombs. Among other things, they claimed to have encountered ghosts under the ground. Both archaeologists and tourists were even specially examined. The version of their mass hallucinations was excluded. Scientists are still unable to unravel the mystery of this place and figure out the cause of mysterious phenomena in the Czech underground. Medveditskaya Ridge. The Medveditskaya Ridge is a chain of small hills which are arranged in an oval. It's located in Volgograd Oblast. Locals consider the Medveditskaya Ridge one of the most mysterious places in the world. According to witnesses, unidentified flying objects often appear there. Lightning also strikes in the Medveditskaya Ridge. It can hit the same trees several times until only charred bases are left of them. Lightning balls, which fly low above the ground, are not uncommon here. Also, interestingly, that under the ground, the Medveditskaya Ridge is literally riddled with mysterious tunnels. Locals have been attributed all kinds of origin to them. They've called them secret government bases, traces of ancient civilizations, and a mysterious transportation network. But no one's managed to find out what exactly the tunnels are and what exact mystery of the Medveditskaya Ridge lies in. Hoia Forest. Romania has long been ranked among the most mysterious places in the world. Transylvania alone is worth a lot because, according to legends and tales, this is where Count Dracula lived. Romania is associated with vampires and other horrors, but there's something else in this country which is eerie. It's the Hoia Forest. This forest is located near the Romanian city of Cluj-Napoca. It looks like an ordinary forest, which doesn't differ in anything unusual, but according to the locals, there are some creepy and strange things happening in the forest. They call the Hoia Forest the Romanian Bermuda Triangle because various paranormal phenomena were recorded here more than once. It's believed that the forest is haunted and that UFOs often come here. In addition, it's believed that if you take a picture in this forest, the picture will show an unknown creepy face. It may seem that all of this is just to lure tourists, but even foreign tourists themselves agree with the locals. Scientists, on the other hand, shrug their shoulders. They don't know what exactly is the reason for the strangeness in this Romanian forest. Baalbek. The ancient city of Baalbek, which is located in Lebanon, was once one of the most important cultural centers of the ancient world. But nowadays, it's almost completely destroyed and forgotten. And that's a pity because this place can be called one of the most mysterious and inexplicable on the planet. One of the most interesting places in the city is its terraces. Their peculiarity is that they're lined with huge stone blocks weighing 300 to 1,000 tons. And one of the local megaliths, called the Stone of the South, weighs over 1,000 tons. Just to give you an idea of the scale, only a few blocks in the Great Pyramid of Giza weigh 15 tons. But that's not all. The blocks in Baalbek are stacked with incredible accuracy and precision. Even a thin sewing needle cannot go between some of them. But how could ancient people create something like this? if we can't create a copy of such stone blocks even with modern technology. In addition to the Stone of the South in Baalbek, there are several other mysterious giant stones in the world. Next, I'll tell you about the huge boulder and also show you interesting places and objects that defy the laws of physics. Krishna's Butterball. According to legend, the gods placed this boulder on the slope at Mamayapuram as a reminder to the people that the impossible is possible. Over the years, however, the landmark was no longer referred to as the Heavenly Stone. According to some sources, the Stone of Sky God was renamed to Krishna's Butterball by local guides. The 250-ton boulder is famous for its unusual location. It's hanging on the hillside, tilting at 45 degrees. The giant balancing stone is 6 meters high and 5 meters in diameter. The giant boulder, which is popular with tourists, has been suspended on the slope for centuries, but it never slid down the hill or even moved, even though attempts were made to push it. If historians are to be believed, the earliest attempt was made in the 12th century. At the time, the local king wanted to move the divine stone to keep it out of the hands of sculptors. According to the law, damaging the boulder was forbidden, but the idea of shaping it occurred to many people. Despite the king's good intentions, locals didn't move the boulder and the king had to abandon his plan. Another attempt was made in the early 20th century. In 1908, the governor of Madras, Arthur Lawley, intended to remove the boulder from the hill. He feared that the stone could roll away at any time and destroy the city buildings at the foot of the hill. 7 elephants were used to move the stone, but the boulder did not move an inch. It would seem that for modern scientists, the Krishna's Butterball should not represent some mystery. Today, researchers have access to dozens of different and ultra-precise methods of analysis. However, scientists still have not been able to give a coherent explanation as to why there's a large stone lying on a steep slope that cannot roll down the slope even by force. According to the most popular theory, the stability of the boulder is based on the friction force and the location of the center of gravity. Wobbly stone. It's hard to imagine, but the Krishna's Butterball from India is not alone in its uniqueness. There was a similar boulder on the other side of the world. In an Argentine town of Tandil, there was once one of Argentina's most striking landmarks, a stone that weighed about 300 tons. Why am I talking about it in the past tense? The fact is that one day gravity let it down after all. The giant boulder has long attracted tourists to the slope. People were especially impressed by the fact that the stone was swaying in the gusts of the wind, but it didn't move, as if a mystical force had chained the natural monument to the rock. When travelers came here, they couldn't believe their eyes. After spending only one night in Tandil, in the morning they immediately ran to check whether the stone had fallen down. The locals tell an interesting legend, according to which the stone appeared on the slope thousands of years ago when a deity appeared on Earth. It was he who taught the people various crafts and farming, but the deity did not stay long among the people, though he left an unusual mark, a wobbly stone, which had to stand on the mountain until the very moment when the son of the sun returned. About 100 years ago, something unexpected happened. The stone fell from the rock. It's not known what caused the fall. Soil erosion or an explosion during work in a mine are considered the most realistic assumptions. Be that as it may, the people of the town were shocked by the event. People were sad about the wobbly stone for years after it fell. According to one version, a certain local resident who wanted to show off to tourists might have pushed the stone. Place with no gravity. Is there a place on Earth where the usual gravity doesn't work? There is. But what does it look like? Blocks are not falling down and people are floating in the air? In fact, this is a little different. For 40 years, scientists have been trying to figure out where the force of gravity has disappeared in a large area of one region of Canada, particularly in the Hudson Bay area. Gravity in this area and nearby regions is extremely low, much lower than in other parts of the world. The phenomenon was first discovered in the 1960s when the Earth's gravitational field was fully studied. 2 theories have been proposed to explain the anomaly. According to one of them, magma flowing in the Earth's interior is constantly swirling and moving, rising and falling, creating convection currents. Convection pulls down the Earth's continental plates, which reduces the mass in that area and reduces the force of gravity. Another theory concerns the Laurentide ice sheet, which covered most of present-day Canada and the northern United States. This ice sheet was nearly 3 kilometers thick in most areas. It was very heavy and pressed on the Earth. but 10,000 years ago the ice sheet melted and finally disappeared, leaving a deep indentation in the Earth. As a result, the area around Hudson Bay has less mass because part of the Earth has been pushed aside by the ice sheet. Less mass just means less gravity. A mysterious road in South Korea. An unusual optical illusion was recently discovered on a road in South Korea. Curious locals come here by the hundreds to see the anomaly for themselves. Empty bottles and cans left on this road on Jeju Island will obediently slide uphill. Tourists have verified this more than once, and the country's resourceful authorities quickly made the place attractive to tourists and even put up a sign indicating where the gravity anomaly begins. Scientists are sure that the anomaly doesn't look like an anomaly here. It's all the fault of an optical illusion, which makes us believe that the landscape surrounding the road is flat. However, it's very difficult to believe this for those who have seen the road with their own eyes, especially if they've had the opportunity to sit behind the wheel of a car that was driving itself uphill. In general, the world is full of strange and unusual roads. Next, I'll tell you about a road you can't cross, several roads of death where you can easily fall into an abyss, and a 666-kilometer-long Hell Highway. In the French Gulf of Bourgneuf, there is one of the most unusual roads on the planet, the Passage de Goy. It's unusual because no one can cross it. But how's that possible? Actually, it's quite simple. The Passage de Goy is a tidal road. This means that the route is covered by water, connecting the French island Noirmoutier with the French mainland. The Passage de Goy is a strip of asphalt running in the middle of the sea. It's impossible to cross this road because if you cross it perpendicularly, you'll find yourself in the water in any case. The road is accessible for cars only a couple times a day when the water recedes, and the Passage de Goy opens for a couple of hours. During this time, drivers can drive on a 4-kilometer stretch of federal highway, which runs along the Atlantic coast of France. The rest of the time, the Passage de Goy is flooded with up to 4 meters of water. So neither driving nor crossing is out of the question. By the way, the French authorities even recommend all drivers who go on this road to take boats with them, just in case. Road to Nowhere. The Passage de Goy cannot be crossed for physical reasons. Road to Nowhere does not accept pedestrians for another reason. The highway is located in New Mexico, near the city of Albuquerque. In the past century, this highway was not given much importance. That all changed in the year 2000 when people began to go missing here. Since 2000, according to the official records alone, 17 people have disappeared without a trace on the route. Not surprisingly, the highway soon acquired its creepy name, because it's really unclear where exactly the drivers have gone. The scale of the disappearances is frightening. In some cases, entire families have disappeared here. Once a family from Chicago disappeared on Road to Nowhere. It included a couple and their 2 children. The tourists had just wanted to take a ride down the road and enjoy the views of the mountain range the road leads to, but no one else had seen them. Many detectives, scientists, and even psychics tried to solve the mystery of the disappearance of the people, but all their attempts were in vain. Since then, the ill-fated road has been nicknamed the Overland Bermuda Triangle, and pedestrians are now unable to cross it out of fear and prefer not to even approach this terrible highway. Road to Nowhere may be called not only mysterious, but also very dangerous because it's still unclear what exactly is happening on this route. Fairy Meadows. What could be terrible about a road with such a beautiful name? Well, in fact, practically everything. Fairy Meadows is hell, not a road. The most dangerous road in Pakistan near the Gilgit-Baltistan region is 3.3 kilometers above sea level. The narrow track goes directly along the mountains so that on one side the driver sees a stone wall from which huge boulders may fall at any moment, and on the other side the driver sees a huge abyss which they don't want to fall into. The picture is completed with a gravel surface on which it's not easy to pass even with a powerful and reliable car. Add lots of twisting serpentines to this. All this awaits the driver for the next 16 kilometers, which they will never forget. By the way, Fairy Meadows has been in operation for several hundred years and has never been reworked, so we see the original version of the road. Karnali Highway. We'll stay in Asia for a while longer and go to Nepal, where Karnali Highway is located. This is sort of the brother of Fairy Meadows, the road similar to Pakistan's one in many ways. And first of all, they're similar in terms of danger. However, Carnelli Highway is much longer. It's about 250 kilometers long, and the road claims lives of 50 people every year. This is not surprising at all. The lack of any fences, the risk of rock falls, frequent landslides, a huge abyss on one side, a very narrow track, and much more. This is a truly hellish combination, right? The authorities try to protect the drivers by keeping them off the road. For example, for most of the year, cars are forbidden to drive on it. But this doesn't stop the locals. They regularly drive on the road on motorcycles, off-road cars, and buses. Every day you can see a lot of cars here. Maybe the Nepalese are the bravest people in the world. Maybe so, but there's another reason. Carnelli Highway connects dozens of local villages, and there's simply no alternative way to get to some communities. So the Nepalese have to drive on this terrible road at their own risk. Road of Death. But even Carnelli Highway and Fairy Meadows, for all their danger, are inferior in epicism to the Road of Death in Bolivia. It's a cool name, isn't it? Unfortunately, it's also a true one. Victims are not uncommon here, and they're regular. All in all, this is a nightmare, not a road. It's even scary to look at. Huge mountain on one side and not less huge abyss, not separated by fences on the other. So the driver risks of getting hit by a boulder or flying hundreds of meters down. But that's not all. The road's not widened. The track width is hardly more than 3 meters. On such a narrow lane, it's very difficult to drive in general. Now imagine that you run into an oncoming car. This scenario is not uncommon here. One of the drivers has to back up, which is extremely dangerous and difficult in such conditions. Add to this the terrible pavement of mud, and you'll get the most dangerous road on the planet. That's what most experts say about the Bolivian Road of Death. I don't know how brave you have to be to drive on this road. We return to Asia, where the Karakoram Highway is located. It's located on the Kunjarib Pass in the Karakoram mountain range. The height of the pass is more than 4.5 kilometers. At the same time, the highway itself is the highest international highway in the world, which automatically makes it extremely dangerous. Of course, first of all, I'm talking about the high altitude at which you can feel the lack of oxygen. An inexperienced driver going on this highway can simply become a victim of oxygen starvation. But that's not all. The area around the highway is high risk of landslides, and bad weather conditions are not uncommon here. For this reason, the Karakoram Highway is closed during the winter because at this time it's almost impossible to drive on it. But in the summer, the highway is very dangerous as well, so it's better to stay away from it. Kabul-Jalalabad Road. Drivers planning to visit Afghanistan are advised to stay away from Kabul-Jalalabad Road. This highway connects 2 localities with the same name and has a length of about 60 kilometers. For many years, there have been daily accidents on this road. Many of them end up with fatal consequences. Local residents have already ceased to keep records of accidents because absolutely everybody knows about the notorious features of the mountain road here. The reason for these statistics is simple. Most Afghan drivers have a blatant disregard of their own safety, and they drive through the sharp turns of this narrow mountain road at breakneck speed. And speed and sharp turns are not a good combination. And lastly, another road you wouldn't want to be on. Here it is, the Dalton Highway. But why is it even in this episode? Where are the dangerous abysses? Where's the narrow track and the mountain with falling rocks? Where are the most dangerous serpentine roads? None of that's here, but that doesn't mean the highway is safe. This highway is in Alaska, and it is 666 kilometers long. Number of the beast is something suspicious, isn't it? It is. The Dalton Highway could well be called a hell of a highway because there's almost no infrastructure. Throughout the long road, the driver will encounter only a couple of tiny settlements and a couple of gas stations. The rest of the time, it's just a straight road through the cold and harsh Alaska. In many parts of the road, there's no cell phone service, and there's nothing and no one to help. This means you have to rely only on yourself. If a car breaks down or runs out of gas, it can be a death sentence for the driver. But even the track itself is not perfect. It's covered in a lot of ice and potholes, so you can easily get into an accident. U.S. authorities strongly advise drivers to prepare for a trip on the Dalton Highway with all the equipment, tools, and groceries they need in case something goes wrong. Write in the comments, which of these roads would you dare to drive? Next, let's talk about such a mysterious place as the Bermuda Triangle. Everyone knows that ships and planes often go missing there, and then no one can find them. Stay tuned to learn about the missing planes in the Bermuda Triangle as well as the incredible story of pilot Bruce Gernon, who managed to get out of that creepy area. You'll find out what happened there to him. Bruce Gernon is the name of the man who managed to get out of the Bermuda Triangle after incredibly strange things started happening to him. Moreover, it's believed that Bruce is the only one to be able to do it in general. Bruce worked as a pilot. In December 1970, he flew out of the Bahamas and set a course for Miami Beach through the Bermuda Triangle. It was the most ordinary flight that should have gone without problems. But shortly after Bruce gained altitude, strange things began to happen. Gernon saw an unusual semicircular shaped cloud. As the pilot recounted, at first the cloud was small, but when he flew up to it and was in the cloud itself, it increased dramatically in size. At the same time, it suddenly went dark. The pilot's eyes were illuminated only by flashes, which began to shine brightly right in front of his eyes. The farther Bruce flew, the more the flashes blinded him. The pilot was really frightened and decided to change course. He turned the plane around and flew back. It turned out to be the right decision. Having turned the plane, Gernon saw something like a gap. The blue sky was visible through the formed tunnel. The pilot didn't hesitate to direct the plane into the tunnel, which had already begun to close. Fortunately, Gernon managed to fly through it before it closed completely. After a while, Bruce contacted the dispatchers who said they couldn't see him on radar. Only after all the haze, fog, and clouds cleared did the aircraft instruments start working, and the dispatchers determined Gernon's location. When it became clear where the pilot was flying, everybody was shocked. It turns out that the plane almost reached its destination, although about 45 minutes had passed from the moment of takeoff. The flight itself should have lasted no less than an hour and a half. As Bruce himself suggested, the Bermuda Triangle from which he miraculously managed to get away was to blame. The pilot believed that if he hadn't managed to get out of the tunnel, his plane would have never been found. In the pilot's opinion, the Bermuda Triangle was not just swallowing planes and ships, but was a time-space phenomenon. The pilot believed that the triangle helped him to make a time leap. According to him, he traveled 100 kilometers literally in 10 seconds, cutting through time and space. Despite Bruce Gernon's interesting story, his explanation of the whole situation sounds kind of strange, doesn't it? It's hard enough to believe in tunnels, gaps, and flickering flashes, but what if the pilot was right and his whole story was authentic? After all, he did manage to get the plane out of the Bermuda Triangle when things started to get weird there. The mysteries of the Bermuda Triangle began to be actively discussed only in the middle of the last century, but mystical disappearances have occurred in this region of the Atlantic before. The disappearance of the Carroll A. Deering crew is one of the most famous and mysterious in this regard. No, it's not the name of the ship's captain, but the name of the American five-masted commercial schooner. The ship made its last voyage in January 1921. Carroll A. Deering and its crew were last seen near the floating lighthouse of Cape Lookout off South Carolina. 2 days after that, the vessel was found stranded off North Carolina. But there was no crew on board. In all other respects, it seemed as if the crew were hiding somewhere on the ship. Dinner was being prepared in the galley and the sails were up. The crew was never found. To this day, it's still unclear where everyone had gone and how exactly the ship was stranded. There have been many theories, but many are sure that it was the Bermuda Triangle that took the sailors with it. A little earlier, another mysterious disappearance occurred. The American ship USS Cyclops, used as a dry cargo ship, sailed on its last voyage in March 1918. More than 300 people were aboard. More than 10,000 tons of ore were carried on that voyage, but none of it was found. USS Cyclops seemed to have trickled away. No alarm signals were sent by the crew. The ship seemed to have sunk into the earth, or rather into the water, but in such a case there must have been some wreckage, bodies, or something else. But no. A thorough search yielded no results. The USS Cyclops was never found. During the search, there were various theories about what happened, but none of them could adequately explain the disappearance of a large ship with a lot of cargo and 300 passengers. To me, there's only one explanation. The USS Cyclops became a victim of the Bermuda Triangle, which will never bring the ship back. The disappearance of the USS Cyclops, by the way, is recognized as the largest in the history of the Bermuda Triangle. Lockheed R-7V1. Let's get back to planes. If Bruce Gernon's aircraft managed to get out of the mystical zone, then Lockheed R-7V1 remained somewhere in the Bermuda Triangle forever. The large airliner carrying 42 people from the U.S. to Morocco was considered something of a Titanic for early 20th century ships at the time. The airliner was much better protected than other planes and was very reliable. On October 30, 1954, the plane left the United States. Shortly before midnight, the pilots made contact for the last time. At that time, they were already in the Bermuda Triangle area. They did not contact again and the plane disappeared. Ships and airplanes were sent to search for the missing plane. They sought the area where the airliner could have disappeared around the clock but found nothing. No wreckage, no belongings, and no bodies. In general, not a single clue. Avro Tudor 4 Star Tiger. Avro Tudor 4 Star Tiger was another aircraft unlucky enough to be in the Bermuda Triangle. On January 30, 1948, the aircraft flew from Santa Maria in the Azores to Bermuda. Before takeoff, it was noted that the plane had problems with the heater as well as the compass, but the pilots decided to fly carefully at low altitude to avoid wind gusts. In addition, the plane was flying behind the Lancaster, another aircraft that was transmitting weather information. But this tactic didn't work out. At some point, communication with the plane was lost. The Lancaster landed successfully at its destination, but Star Tiger was never found. 25 passengers and 6 crew members were reported missing, and the incident was put down to the Bermuda Triangle. What's going on in the Bermuda Triangle in the first place? Why do planes and ships go missing there so often? Is there any way to explain it? Yes, and there are some interesting alternative and exotic theories about it, which I'll tell you at the end of the episode. According to one of the most daring hypotheses, all the accidents that happen in the Bermuda Triangle are the fault of a comet. Proponents of this theory believe that about 11,000 years ago, a comet fell into the very spot where the Bermuda Triangle is now located. This celestial body may have had special electromagnetic properties that affect the operation of navigational equipment and engines. Hence, all of these malfunctions in the electronics of ships. An even more daring and exotic theory is that the Bermuda Triangle is stacked with all kinds of portals. In fact, one of them was told by Bruce Gernon, the main hero of this episode. As you remember, the portal was temporary. By flying through it, Bruce reduced the flight time by about half. Proponents of the portals theory believe that there are space-time distortions in the Bermuda Triangle. In this part of the ocean, time can go differently, and space can be connected with parallel worlds. Finally, another alternative theory. Probably it's one of the most unusual and exotic theories about the Bermuda Triangle. Its supporters believe that the United States Navy's Atlantic Undersea Test and Evaluation Center is involved in the disappearances. According to supporters of this theory, this center is engaged in secret tests of submarines, weapons, and sonar. Tests are conducted in the area of the Bermuda Triangle. In this case, the disappearances of planes and ships can be put down to the fact that their passengers and crew members are simply witnesses who need to be eliminated so they don't blab anything. Something in the style of Hollywood movies, right? But why not? After all, history is replete with cases when witnesses have been disposed of in a heartbeat. The 1986 Chernobyl disaster created another mysterious and unusual place. The disaster's consequences still force the preservation of the exclusion zone around the power plant. The secrets that this area holds are still stirring people's minds. But what dangers lurk in this area? And which local finds frighten even experienced scientists? Let's find out. Most animals that were close to the reactor at the time of the explosion died within hours. The forest near the number 4 reactor was also contaminated. Later, it was given a special name. It became known as the Red Forest. This is because the trees, which received the greatest share of radioactive dust emissions during the reactor explosion, soon changed their leaves and needles from green to orange and brownish red. In the process of eliminating of the accident consequences, the Red Forest was cut down. However, rusty trees can still be found in Chernobyl. The radiation background around the Chernobyl nuclear power plant is considered high to this day. However, scientists have noted that during 35 years of isolation, the area around the plant has turned into a kind of nature reserve, which is now home to many species of animals and birds, including the rarest ones. The mass media tries not to discuss the subject of mutations in the Chernobyl forests much, but there are still famous examples. For example, there are giant catfish living in cooling ponds near the plant. Years of quiet, well-fed life away from humans have allowed these fish to grow to unbelievable sizes. People who have been near the ponds have shared videos on the internet, which clearly show that some of the catfish have long exceeded 2 meters in length. However, rumor has it that there are larger individuals in the ponds around Chernobyl. The reports from researchers show that the bodies of fish have indeed accumulated a huge amount of radiation. But the rampant growth of the catfish has nothing to do with this. According to biologists, the several meters long catfish have become like these simply because nothing has threatened them. Losing all their natural enemies, the long-lived fish were growing because no one was bothering them. The supply of food from humans also played its role. Not many people passing near the ponds would refrain from throwing the giants a treat. The exclusion zone has become a nature reserve. Here you can find foxes, wolves, deer, and wild boars. Rare bird species, including owls and eagles, have settled comfortably in the swampy area. Is radiation really no longer affecting Pripyat's fauna? In 2014, scientists placed 24 motion-sensitive hidden cameras in different parts of the exclusion zone. All animal species caught in the frame were monitored for a long time. According to the report, no major abnormalities were detected. Overall, the picture looked almost perfect. However, what these scientists found in the Chernobyl forest amazed the whole world. But before that, I'd like to talk about the people who live in the exclusion zone. Yes, not only animals live in Chernobyl. Few people know that a few hundred people live here as well. Almost all of them are workers and scientists. Although self-settlers live nearby, these are people who refuse to leave their homes despite the danger. One of the last consensus of Chernobyl residents was conducted in 2017. At that time, 84 people were declared in the official statistics. Not surprisingly, most of them are elderly people living in small villages. There are hardly more than 10 people living in each of these villages. However, among these self-settlers, there are also people who live all alone. Single self-settlers brought scientists an unexpected surprise. More recently, researchers discovered a herd of cows in the exclusion zone. Apparently, the cows were left unattended when some of these self-settlers moved away or passed away. Surprisingly, the released cows quickly learned survival skills and learned to endure even the coldest winters. It seemed that even domestic animals live good without humans. The root of the problem. On April 26, 1986, the destruction of the No. 4 reactor triggered the largest release of radiation in history. It took 206 days to eliminate the consequences of the tragedy, and 90,000 people were mobilized to build the sarcophagus. The first volunteers to arrive on site became victims of severe radiation sickness. It was decided to replace them with robots, which constantly broke down and refused to function in the contamination zone. Then soldiers and other workers, later to be called liquidators, were deployed to the scene of the tragedy. They managed to erect a concrete sarcophagus over the reactor. A monumental structure was supposed to keep the radiation inside the power plant and also was supposed to keep everyone else away from it. However, the sarcophagus was conceived only as a temporary solution. Gradually, its walls were cracking, and already 10 years after the accident, the total area of these cracks were almost 1,000 square meters. In 2017, a second sarcophagus, this time a steel one, called the New Safe Confinement, began to be built over the first one. It was commissioned in 2019. It's been more than 30 years since the accident, and all this time the rains and winds continue to wash radiation out of the foundation of the old sarcophagus drop by drop. Where was this radiation going? How far did it spread? You will not find reports on this on official resources. Reaction acceleration. Even on the most modern nuclear power plants, the use of water is unavoidable. Here it performs three functions at once. It cools, evaporates, turning into steam and powering turbines, and slows down the movement of particles. However, in the same way, water not only slows down the movement of neutrons, but also accelerates fission. According to official data, the slow growth of radioactive fission reactions is the destroyed Chernobyl nuclear power plant reactor is possible for several reasons. But it's enough that the increase in the reaction rate has already been recognized by the scientific community. The intensity of fission reactions at neutrons depends on the presence of a decelerator. In this case, the decelerator is water, which can come with rain or soil streams. The water decelerates the neutrons, which contributes to the fission reaction rate in the fuel masses. Also, when exposed to ionizing radiation and when the fuel dries out, it changes its structure, which can also affect the intensity of nuclear fission in it. Is it too complicated? Unfortunately, it is. At the same time, scientists state that the role of water in fission acceleration has not yet been fully studied. It's worth noting that the new safe confinement, in which construction more than 2 billion euros were invested, indeed no longer allows rainwater to enter the reactor. As a result, the neutron flux has stabilized or even begun to decrease at most points of concealment. But what if enough rainwater has already entered the first sarcophagus? In recent years, particle activity has started to increase in some sub-reactor rooms. This can be seen, for example, inside the room codenamed 305/2. Is it too difficult to understand the scientific terms? Well, there are other indications of a powerful radiation source within the exclusion zone. The evidence may seem circumstantial to you, but it doesn't make it any less creepy. As soon as the authorities announced the relative stabilization of the situation in the exclusion zone, tourists streamed to Chernobyl. The pioneers, of course, risked their own health and even their lives. But over the years, radiation levels fell, and today it's even allowed to give official tours on the territory of Pripyat and Chernobyl. Not all daredevils agree to obediently follow a guide along the trodden routes. Many of those who dare to visit Chernobyl go on a hike alone. Such a decision was made by a British resident named Neil Ansell. He decided that it won't be interesting to explore the zone as part of a group. Ansell hired an individual guide and went to Pripyat. The British visited the amusement park, walked through abandoned administrative buildings, schools and hospitals, and then decided to check the town's radiation level. The measuring device reacted sluggishly to the surrounding area. The radiation level in the touristic area was relatively low. That all changed when Ansell found a bag full of items in the undergrowth at the edge of town. Swiping a measuring device over it, the man was astonished. The device registered radiation levels at 2.728 millisieverts, which is almost 200 times higher than a CAT scan. By comparison, a single exposure to a dose of 5,000 millisieverts can be fatal within 1 month. It's not known what allowed the hiker to refrain from such a rash act, whether it was experienced guide or a strong sense of self-preservation, but Ansell never opened the bag. Moreover, he preferred to get as far away as possible. The discovery stunned the world, and many internet users who read Ansell's story jokingly remarked that the hiker must have found the loot abandoned by some urban explorer. Speaking of unexplained and mysterious places, it's impossible to ignore Google Maps. After all, this service allows us to virtually travel around the world. But not always on Google Maps we can see only harmless streets and landscapes. Sometimes you can find there something mysterious, mystical, and spooky. Next, I'll show you Google Maps images that no one should have seen. Last year, an amateur explorer of Google Maps found a curious place which immediately attracted the attention of users. On the satellite images taken in the area of Death Valley in the United States, an obscure object of black color with an acidic green hue was found. Its length is about 135 meters, and right next to it is a hollow, which was immediately called a UFO landing spot. 14 kilometers away, a crashed plane lies. What is it? A real UFO that crashed in the desert and was guarded by the military? A flooded quarry? Or something else? Seems to me we shouldn't rule out the UFO version because there are other similar Google Maps images. For example, a few years ago, a user looking at a map of a Romanian forest noticed a silver-colored flying saucer that was half covered by tree branches. Thanks to the lighting and shadows, one could clearly see the outline of an alien ship with round portholes. Do Google Maps really capture real UFOs at times? I don't know about the Death Valley object, but the Romanian UFO turned out to be an ordinary abandoned water pump. Loch Ness Monster. While some users are discussing aliens, others believe that thanks to Google Maps, the mystery of the Loch Ness Monster has finally been solved. That's the opinion of Lisa Stout, a U.S. resident who discovered the famous monster on Google Maps about 4 years ago. The woman said she began looking for the monster after she was fired from her job. She noted that she purposely looked at maps for several hours a day and eventually fortune smiled upon her, and she noticed a strange silhouette, which looks like the silhouette of the monster from the Scottish lake. In the published photo, you can see a dark silhouette protruding several meters out of the water. This is roughly how Nessie is portrayed by artists, and this is how it looks in various unconfirmed pictures. Strange symbol. Let's take our mind off aliens and legendary creatures and move to Uruguay, where there's a very strange and mysterious symbol found. It was found with the help of Google Maps near the city of Florida. Yeah, it turns out that's not just a state in America. The symbol clearly stands out from the neighboring landings. It looks like some kind of trident, which is quite large in size. Although it is in fact a landmark in Uruguay and Florida, the locals still don't know what it is. According to one version, these trees were planted in this form by farmers, and it happened about 60 years ago. According to another version, it's a ritual reference to the vessel containing the elixir of eternal life. Unfortunately, it's not known for certain what it actually is. Patterns. If we move from Uruguay to neighboring Argentina and look at the fields in the province of Rio Negro, at some point we might come across a picture like this. It looks strange to say the least. We see some mysterious patterns scattered on the ground, but what are they? Could they be the work of aliens who fired their guns at the Earth in ancient times? Or maybe it's a message left by an unknown civilization. In fact, everything's simple. It's an oil field. Yes, oil is produced not only in Russia, Saudi Arabia, Canada, and Iran, but also in Argentina. In general, gas and oil are the most important of the fuel and energy resources of this country, so similar fields can be seen in other provinces of Argentina. Here we see a similar picture. Google Maps has captured some strange patterns in the desert. From the outside, it may seem like an unknown settlement with round-shaped houses or another mystery. In fact, it's simpler than that, but that doesn't make the picture any less creepy. This is a test site in Nevada. The dots you see are craters from nuclear explosions. The test site is only 105 kilometers from Las Vegas and has been in operation since 1951. More than 900 nuclear explosions have been carried out here since the ban. The bombs were detonated on the surface of the range and underground. The result is such a post-apocalyptic landscape. The test site and the oil field are certainly interesting, but what about the crime scene? You can find that on Google Maps too. If we look at the pond of the city of Almere in the Netherlands, we can see an eerie picture: trees, landscape, and a pier with traces of blood on it. You can see that someone is dragging a body to the pond to hide it. It looks scary. Did Google Maps really capture the real massacre? Fortunately, it's not, though it's very easy to confuse it with a murder. In fact, the picture is of a retriever who was out for a walk with his owner. The dog simply jumped into the water and then ran to its owner, who was standing on the wooden pier. The dog left a wet trail behind it, which internet users mistook for a blood trail. Few people know, but Google Maps works not only on Earth. With the help of Google Maps, you can even travel around Mars. This feature was added a few years ago. In general, you can visit several planets and satellites at once, but we're interested in Mars because there you can see this. Some mysterious buildings are on the surface of the red planet. Could it be that the colonization of Mars has already begun, but we're not being told anything about it? Or is this a residential complex of Martians who do exist? Actually, it's a very cool Easter egg. You can get to this base and see that these structures are a Google office. Who knows, maybe in a couple of decades, such an office will be on Mars in reality. Giant in the desert. Scrolling through Google Maps images in South America, you might come across a huge image of a giant. It's expected. It'll surprise or even scare you, since you won't expect to see something like this in some faraway desert. What is it? This is a large anthropomorphic geoglyph, which is called the Atacama Giant. Its length is 86 meters, so there's no problem to see it even from a satellite. In fact, it can be seen in full only from a satellite or a bird's-eye view. What's surprising is that the giant is not made by modern people, but by the Aborigines who lived here about 3,000 years ago. Who needed to create such a huge geoglyph, and for what purpose was it created? Any guesses? Pentagram. If you scroll through Google Maps images in the area of the town of Lysychovsk, Kazakhstan, you can see a giant pentagram. It's unexpected and even creepy to stumble upon it, because the pentagram is often associated with the devil. It seems that occult rites, initiations, and sacrifices are held in this place. Some people even believe that there are vampires in this area, but of course that's not true. It turns out that the pentagram is a children's summer camp. The explanation's simple. The trees were planted in the shape of a star as a symbol of the Soviet Union. That is, it's not a pentagram, but exactly a star. You just have to look at the photo from a different angle. By the way, the summer camp never opened, but the park became world famous because of the satellite images. What could be scarier than a pentagram in northern Kazakhstan? What about an entire village with lifeless inhabitants? If we go to the Japanese island of Shikoku and look into the village of Nagoro, we can see just such a picture. Hundreds of dolls are scattered and spread out everywhere, some sitting at the bus stop, some working in the fields, some just hiding. Either way, the setting is scary. It looks like a scene from a horror movie, but it's totally a real place. When you learn the truth about this village, it begins to look less creepy. The fact is that Nagoro used to be quite a large village with hundreds of people living there at the time. The village was almost completely depopulated when young people began to leave it en masse in the last century. At the beginning of the 21st century, a woman named Sukumi Ayano returned to the village. She didn't want to see the nearly deserted village, so she decided to make one life-size doll for each of the villagers who had left. And that's how Nagoro became the doll village. Unusual, but eerie. The following Google Maps image gives food for thought. It shows a pyramid located in Antarctica. You can clearly see the sides of the structure and its facets. The resemblance to the notorious Egyptian pyramids is obvious, but what is this really? Most skeptical scientists argue that it's not some kind of structure at all, but only part of a mountain range, an ordinary mountain that's taken such a non-standard shape due to strong winds. Theorists and UFOologists don't agree with them. They believe that the mountain couldn't take such a perfect pyramidal shape, and they're sure this is a real pyramid built by aliens. It's impossible to verify it yet. The pyramid is located in a remote region of Antarctica where no man has yet set foot. Do you want to know what else hides beneath the ice of this mysterious continent? Then stay tuned, because in the final part of this episode, I'll tell you what creature lives under the ice of Antarctica and why a hole the size of an entire country is forming in the middle of this continent. Among the crazy theories about Antarctica, there is a legend of an underwater city. Surprisingly, even some historians share this point of view. But could Antarctica actually have appeared in the place of the long-lost Atlantis? Or is the continent nothing more than a coincidence? If ancient legends are to be believed, Atlantis is a mythical island. The hypothesis of an Antarctic Atlantis was first published in an Italian journal nearly half a century ago. The article reported that American scientists have found undeniable traces of prehistoric high civilization, which existed on our planet about 15,000 years ago. This hypothesis was further developed in the book by Italian Barbiero Flavio, A Civilization Under the Ice, which proved that Atlantis was located in the place of the current Antarctica. The climate at that time was quite warm until about 10 to 12,000 years ago, when the Earth collided with a celestial body of enormous mass and size. The impact shifted the Earth's axis, resulted in floods, gigantic earthquakes, and heavy rains that destroyed Atlantis. Antarctic Atlantis completely fits the ancient legends, as it's located simultaneously in the Pacific and Indian and the Atlantic Oceans. In full accordance with Plato's story, its inhabitants could control the shores of 3 continents at once. Strange skulls. It was truly mind-blowing news that skulls had recently been found in the ice of Antarctica. Unusual skulls. 3 oblong-shaped ancient skulls were claimed to have been discovered on the continent by a team of archaeologists. Reports claim that an archaeologist named Damian Waters and his team discovered the skulls in an area called Lapaye. They were originally claimed to be the first human remains found in Antarctica. Then their name was suddenly changed to First Alien Remains Found on Earth. It's important to note that similar elongated skulls have been found before, mostly in Egypt, Syria, and Mesopotamia. All the ice of the world. There are many rumors and conspiracy theories surrounding Antarctica. Were there really the Third Reich bases here? Theoretically, it's possible. A huge snow-covered wasteland, 1.5 times the size of the United States, is an ideal place for a secret training ground. 99% of Antarctica is made up of ice. Yes, there's too much of it. Scientists estimate that the eastern and western parts of the continent represent 90% of the total ice on the planet. But even such harsh conditions do not stop scientists and travelers. Since the 1820s, a variety of groups and teams have been sent to the continent. One of the mysteries explorers encountered during their visits was the so-called singing ice. For example, the huge Ross Ice Shelf sings almost constantly, and even right now. The frequency of this sound is too low to be heard by the human ear, but seismic sensors are up to the task. Scientists say the strange singing is caused by strong winds which make the snow and ice on the surface of the shelf vibrate. But then how can the sudden change of the singing tone be explained? As it turned out, it does not depend on the change of winds. Could it be that the ice singing is caused by something else, not yet explainable? The driest land. It's hard to believe, but it's in Antarctica that some of the driest lands on our planet are located. I'm talking about the McMurdo Dry Valleys, which have an area of about 8,000 square meters and consist of 3 Antarctic oases. They're almost completely free of snow and ice. The reason for this is the strongest winds blowing close to the ground and reaching speeds of 150 kilometers per hour. Scientists have found out that some parts of the McMurdo Dry Valleys have not had precipitation for 2 million years. The area is considered especially protected due to the absence of ice cover. It's convenient to conduct geological research. In addition, the McMurdo Dry Valleys are close to the natural conditions of Mars, and therefore spacecraft were tested in the valleys. New creature. Recently, at a depth of about 350 meters, American archaeologists discovered something truly frightening. The Antarctic creature they found resembled none of those already known to science. What class would it belong to? So far, this is unknown. Fortunately, the new creature was relatively small. Its body length was only 20 centimeters. We shouldn't be too afraid, even if it's just another hoax. Could it be something extraterrestrial? On the bright and flat wastelands of Antarctica, any change is clearly visible. Of course, in such an environment, a meteorite fall simply cannot go unnoticed. It's partly for this reason that most of the meteorites we've studied have been found on the icy continent. Over the past 50 years, about 10,000 meteorites of different shapes and sizes were found in Antarctica. Some of them are several billion years old. Among them, there are guests from Mars. What might Antarctica and the planet Mars have in common? At least some rocks. The Martian meteorite known as Allen Hills 84001 was found in the Allen Hills Mountains in Antarctica back in December 1984. This find caused a wide public outcry because of the fossilized microscopic structures found on the surface of the meteorite, which could be bacteria. The question of the extraterrestrial origin of bacteria is still open, but it's supported by the fact that the size of the found structures is 20 to 100 nanometers in diameter, which is much smaller than any known form of cellular life. Scientists speculate that the meteorite broke away from Mars 4 billion years ago. At that time, there was still liquid water. The rest of the meteorites found on Earth are from a later period. The find was truly unique, confirming the theory of extraterrestrial origin of bacteria. In addition, according to scientists, it's of interest for the reason that this particular meteorite may have destroyed vegetation in ancient tropical Antarctica. Finds from Mars were discovered in the 21st century as well. Another meteorite of Martian origin was found in December 2003, 750 kilometers from the South Pole. And here we got another small meteorite that hit the Earth in 2002. It was found only in 2015. This specimen featured fossilized remains of bacteria from the Red Planet. How long do we have to wait for something larger to arrive on a meteorite? Hole. Scientists believe that Antarctica's terrain is not as static as it first appears. For example, in 2017, a huge hole the size of Ireland was discovered in the middle of the continent. According to scientists, usually large cavities are formed in relative proximity to the boundary ice and sea, but the hole, which has been dubbed the Polynya, was located several hundred kilometers from the dividing line. This indicates that it appeared as a result of some unknown processes. A previous hole of this size appeared here in the 1970s, but it remained unstudied due to a lack of satellite observation facilities. For the next 40 years, the sea ice cover remained intact. Scientists believe it's premature to say that the hole in the sea ice was caused by global climate change, but there's still no answer to the question of what exactly causes such holes to appear every half-century. The secret life. It's hard to imagine that such a harsh region as Antarctica could be inhabited by a huge number of species, but it is an objective reality. The scientific community has been convinced by the discovery of lakes beneath layers of ice several meters high. Scientists believe that living organisms can live in lake waters because they contain all the factors necessary for life. For example, fresh water with high oxygen content and relatively high water temperature. Microorganisms adapted to life under such conditions may have unique properties because they've been isolated from the terrestrial biosphere for a long period of time, and thus their evolutionary processes have proceeded independently. The available data indicate that bacteria are the most likely candidates for life in a subglacial lake. It's these creatures that would be able to survive in total darkness and an excess of oxygen. But have scientists been able to find such bacteria? In 2014, a thriving and active ecosystem was discovered in one lake. The microorganisms had been cut off from fresh air and light for millions of years, yet survived thanks to methane and ammonium. This discovery suggests that alien life is not as impossible as previously thought. What prevents such an ecosystem from inhabiting, for example, Jupiter's icy satellite, Europa? And in early October 2016, scientists reported the discovery of what they said was a unique organism in the subglacial lake Vostok in Antarctica. The bacterium they found had a genetic resemblance to living things known to modern science of only 86%. It's believed that this unique bacterium, which could survive at a pressure of 400 atmospheres, may be extraterrestrial in origin. This is indicated by its genetic and chemical composition. Scientists explain that the bacterium was able to survive in the subglacial lake, which was formed 15 million years ago, due to the fact that there are geothermal springs at the bottom of the lake and the water is highly enriched with oxygen. Which place from this episode did you find the most unusual? Let me know in the comments. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so as to not miss a new episode. Thanks a lot for watching.